Okay, guys, if you weren't here in class or if you just needed the second part of the lecture from today because we didn't really get through everything, we spent some time with the play, here it is. Just BBQ thoughts we went over today a little bit more, and then we talked a little bit about Henry VIII, just had some fun taking a selection from Shakespeare's The Life and Times of Henry VIII, and just went through a section where we looked at how in the play, he tried to catch Anne Boleyn's eye, and that led us into some pretty good discussion in terms of why Henry VIII matters, how he ended up with the split of the Anglican Church. Just very basically, he married his wife's, or excuse me, he married his brother's widow. That was his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and Catherine is related to Charles V, who at the time was the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, originally, at least for Charles, based out of Spain. And so this represented a really strong tie between two leaders. You're looking again to advance family name, advance power, etc. And so that made a lot of sense for them. When his wife Catherine could not bear him a son, he was looking to marry somebody else to provide an heir. And in doing so, Charles V, that obviously upset him. And Charles V was actually in Rome. He had men in Rome at the time, kind of surrounding Vatican, surrounding the Pope. And as a result, the Pope said, no, we're not going to do that. And that led to Henry VIII creating the split of the Anglican Church. And sources are kind of up in the air in terms of how the people of England reacted to all of this. But overall, you didn't see too much rebellion against Henry VIII at the time, and there was no immediate backlash in the country. Just having some fun with Henry, obviously popular memes. Wars of religion-ish. The first one, the Habsburg Villa War, excuse me. These aren't really about religion, but they kind of get lumped in just because of the time period that they're in. It's basically the Holy Roman Empire against France. Both of them are Catholic, so again, it's not really about religion, it's about power. France wants to limit the Holy Roman Empire's influence in Germany, because if that's the case, because of Spain now being part of the Holy Roman Empire, in through Central Europe, what is today Switzerland, northern Italy, and then up through Germany. If that's the case, then France is basically surrounded on all sides by the Holy Roman Empire. They didn't want that to happen, so they basically tried to limit the empire's influence in Germany, and that in turn is what allowed the Protestant Reformation to expand really, really quickly in Germany, because you go from, okay, we don't want this strong empire's Catholic influence, and as a result, Martin Luther's ideas could spread a little bit easier. Spain is crushing during this time period. This is Spain's golden age, really, for the next about 200 years, we'll say. There's a little bit of a misnomer that in 1588, when the Spanish Armada is defeated, which we'll get to in a minute, that Spain's golden age ended, but it's really it's later than that Spain's influence kind of goes away. You can take a look at this map here and just see the religious influence. These darker lines are meant to denote the impact of the Holy Roman Empire. So you can see again Germany here. France doesn't really want that to happen, so they try and step in. We see the influence of Martin Luther and his ideas. We see some Calvinist enclaves at different parts, and we also see some Calvinist minorities here in France, and that's going to become really important in a few minutes here. The wars of religion, for real, really are based on these goals. Spain wants to stop the Protestants and the Muslims from expanding their territory. Spain is extremely Catholic, and they want to do that throughout not just Europe, but the Mediterranean as well. For the French Catholics, they want to stop the Huguenots. Basically, they're just French Calvinists. And for the Holy Roman Empire, they want to expand Catholicism's influence. They want it to be a backlash against the Protestant Reformation, and especially in Germany, they want to expand there again. That's the real base of power for Lutheran ideas. For the Netherlands, they are currently at this point in time controlled by Spain, so they're under Catholic influence. However, the majority of the people there are interested in the ideas of the Protestant Reformation, including Lutheranism, and so they're looking to break away and kind of start their own thing. Then we have the English Civil War. This is going to be obviously a fight over power, but it's going to have strong ties to religion. For Spain, they are the clear winners in all of this during this time period. Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire begets the son of Philip II, and Philip II is extremely militaristic in his Catholicism. He believes that there's a way to unite all of Europe under Catholicism, and the way to do it is through army. So he takes on the Turks in the Mediterranean and defeats them. that kind of is the springboard for um, Spain's influence by sea for the next little bit. Then in the Netherlands, we see William of Orange. That's why the Netherlands Olympic teams and different soccer teams and such have orange, even though there's no orange in the flag of the Netherlands, which is this middle one here. The top one is the flag of the area of Orange, and then we can see their logo down here at the bottom. They have it in his namesake. The Netherlands are able to defeat the Spanish to a degree, at least push them out and declare themselves as independent. What is today Belgium is still under Spanish control and is still Catholic. And because of the location of the Netherlands, they're able to shut off the point of Antwerp, which at the time had been the largest port city in that region. And we see the rise of Amsterdam as the largest port city as a result of that. Spain versus England, sort of 1530s, really beginning later than that. But the 1530s is where we see Henry VIII and Charles V and those guys. Again, they're looking to create a truly kind of Catholic Europe at that time, especially Philip II. And Mary Tudor is the Queen of England at the time, half sister of Elizabeth, and gets along very, very well with Philip. Well, when Elizabeth takes over for Mary Tudor, Philip tries to say, all right, well, we're going to get them back. We're going to get Mary back on the throne, or at least that family back on the throne. And so he plans this huge invasion in 1588. But during that time, the Spanish Armada is defeated in part from a storm crossing the English Channel. And we see the ties to religion, possibly that God intervened on behalf of the English. And so they use that as a justification for the Anglican Church over the Catholic Church. And the effects on both of them during this time period is we see that Spain is still a power, but they begin, at least in part, to decline. But it's really more about England. It's really where we see the rise of England as a naval power in the world. And that's going to be England's domain for the next, let's see, 1580s, like 350 years or so, all the way up through World War I, really. The next set of wars that we have here are the French wars. And what happens here, we have the Calvinists, those are French, the Huguenots are French Calvinists, and it really begins with Henry II. He dies, he's accidentally shot in the face during a tournament, kind of like a celebration, and not during battle or anything like that. And as a result, there's confusion as to who is going to take over the throne next. So the next three kings we see are three sons, Catherine de Medici. She's like the original Circe. She is manipulative. She's working behind the scenes constantly. And that brings us, she wants, again, Catholic control. She's based out of this Catholic idealism. From, at least in part, we see influence from the Holy Roman Empire, just a tiny bit. France has always been kind of Catholic at this point in time, and so any difference from there, we don't see Lutherans too much. It's really the Calvinists that you see as a minority religious group in France. St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, August 24th, 1572. There's a wedding that's going to go on, and that wedding was meant to reconcile Protestants and Catholics together. So it was meant to be a good thing, a way to work together. But the night before, the leader of the Catholic noblemen had a leader of the Protestant, obviously Huguenots, murdered. And as a result of that, Catherine wants to take revenge. Ends up being this huge massacre. 20,000 Huguenots are killed by early October. So in the span of about 2 months, 20,000 French Calvinists are killed. This massacre is going to lead to the War of the Three Henrys. Civil wars really between three of the largest houses in France during that time period. And that leads us to Henry IV. And he was the guy who actually was getting married that day, the day after the murder. He becomes the first Bourbon king of France. And really what's kind of special about him is that he's one of these politiques. The idea that one is willing to put aside religious or ideological things in order to seek political solutions. And Elizabeth, whom we'll see and talk about later in England, is very, very similar to this idea. He converted to Catholicism strictly for the loyalty of Paris. He allegedly said, Paris is worth a mass, meaning it's worth it to go to church if it means that I have Paris behind me. Privately, he remains a Calvinist during this time period, but he is the first Bourbon, and the Bourbons are going to be so incredibly important as we move into the rest of French history. He issues the Edict of Nantes. The This is kind of um, throwing a bone the Huguenots' way. He says, all right, well, we're not going to kill you straight up, but you still can't worship in public. You are allowed to worship in private, except in Paris or any other super Catholic city. And he gives the Huguenots access to universities, public offices, um, really things that should be a right anyway if you're living in that country. But this is the first time that they're really seen. Um, in reality, it's more of like a truce to keep the Catholics and Huguenots from continuing to fight. But yeah, at any rate, this eventually is rescinded closely. It lasts for about 80 years or so, where we have this kind of peace, tentative peace. And that brings us almost to the 30 Years' War, which is probably the most important war for the first half of the year in this course. We'll get more into that in the next couple of weeks. We'll kind of take a hiatus next week, heading into the Elizabethan age, and then into the Age of Exploration before we really hit the 30 Years' War. But if you have any questions, please email me this weekend. Let me know. I can absolutely help you guys out. And good luck on the quiz tomorrow.